All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about a tiny four-letter word in C# that, causes so much confusion. It's an absolute classic in developer interviews, var. Seems super simple on the surface, right? But trust me, there's a lot more going on under the hood.
And here it is, the question that trips up so many people. It's probably the biggest misconception out there. Is var just, a shortcut for dynamic? Is it just for when you're too lazy to type out the full name?
The answer? It's a huge, emphatic no. And really, understanding why is one of those things that separates the pros from the rookies. This difference, it's absolutely crucial to how C# actually works. So if it's not dynamic, what is it? Well, the official definition calls it an implicitly typed local variable. But here's the phrase you need to tattoo on your brain. At compile time. This all happens when you build your code. The C# compiler looks at what you wrote and figures out the exact type for that variable before your program even thinks about running. Think of it like a helpful assistant, not a free pass to do whatever you want. Okay, so that brings us right to the main event, busting this big myth. We're going to put var and dynamic in the ring, head to head, and you'll see just how wildly different they are. Here's the absolute core difference. With var, the type gets locked in when you compile. The compiler knows exactly what it's dealing with. But with dynamic, oh, that's a whole other story. The type is a total mystery until your program is actually running. The code has to figure it out on the fly. And that changes everything. Seriously, screenshot this. This is your interview cheat sheet right here. For var, all the type checking happens at compile time. That means it's strongly typed, it's fast, and if you mess up, the compiler yells at you immediately. Perfect. Dynamic is the total opposite. The check happens at runtime, which means it's weakly typed and a lot slower. And here's the scary part. If there's an error, you won't know until the program is running, maybe even when it's in front of a customer. Yikes. Let's make this real with some code. The compiler sees var x equals 10, and it basically says, got it, x is an integer for life. So if you try to set x to 20 later, no problem, that's still an integer. But the second you try something like x equals hello, bam, the compiler slams on the brakes and gives you an error right then and there. It's completely type safe. Okay, so if it's just a stand-in for a real type, why bother, right? Why not just write out int or string or whatever every single time? Well, as it turns out, using var has some huge practical benefits. There are a few big reasons, actually. For one, it often makes your code way more readable by cutting out the noise. It also reduces redundancy, not having to type out some ridiculously long class name on both sides of the equal sign. And this is a big one. It is essential for writing clean LINQ queries. We'll get to that. Finally, it can actually make refactoring your code safer and easier. It's a win-win-win-win. In fact, let's talk about a scenario in modern C#, a really common one, where var isn't just a nice to have, it's literally your only option. I'm talking about something called anonymous types. So picture this. You're using LINQ and you want to pull just a couple of fields from a big object. Say, just the ID and the name from a list of users. You're basically creating a brand new temporary object right there in your query. But here's the catch. That new object type, it doesn't have a name. So what in the world are you supposed to write on the left side of the variable declaration? You can't. There's nothing to write. And this is where var comes in to save the day. With var, you don't have to worry about it. You just let the compiler handle all the hard work. It sees that new nameless type you're creating with the id and name, and it just figures it out. It creates the type behind the scenes and applies it to your user's variable. The result? Your code is clean, it's super readable, and the most important part, it just works. All right, so var is obviously really powerful, but you can't just throw it around everywhere. It's not a magic wand. There are some very strict rules about when and where you can use it, so let's go for them. So there are two big rules to remember. First, var is for local variables only. That means it has to be declared inside a method or a similar scope. And second, you must initialize it on the same line. You can't just write var x and leave it hanging. The compiler needs to see what's on the right side of the equal sign to figure out what the type is. So that means there's a clear list of places var is a big no-no. You can't use it for fields on a class. You can't use it for parameters in a method signature. And you can't use it as a method's return type. All of those spots need an explicit, clearly defined type. Just keep that little mental checklist handy. Okay, time for another classic interview follow-up. We've established that dynamic could be slower. So what about var? Does this handy little compiler shortcut come with some kind of performance hit when your code is actually running?
And the answer is a resounding no. Absolutely zero impact. None. Remember, var is a compile time trick. By the time your code is compiled down into the intermediate language, the stuff that actually runs, it's completely gone. The compiled code is 100% identical to what it would have been if you typed out the full type name yourself. It's just what we call syntactic sugar.
All right, let's wrap this all up. We've busted the dynamic myth, we've gone over the rules, we've seen why it's so useful. Now, how do you take all this knowledge and boil it down into the perfect answer that's going to knock the socks off your interviewer? First off, you gotta understand why they're even asking this question. Spoiler, it's not really about var. It's what we call a proxy question. They're using this simple keyword to test your deeper understanding of some really core concepts. They want to know if you get the C# type system, if you really grasp that critical difference between compile time and runtime, and frankly, if you have good taste when it comes to writing clean, readable code. So if there's only one thing you remember from all of this, let it be this sentence. This is your golden ticket, the perfect interview answer. It's short, it's sweet, and it's dead on accurate. It shows you know it's a compile time feature, that the compiler's doing the heavy lifting, and most importantly, that it has absolutely nothing to do with dynamic typing. You say that, and you've just proven you know what you're talking about. You've cracked the code on var.